We're going to start with David Rowan. He's the editor of the much admired and copied magazine Wired. It's a magazine I look at. I highly recommend you take time to look at it at some point as well. He's a regular conference presenter. David will now bring us up to speed with some of the technology behind the world of media and mobile. He'll also give us his own prognosis of how this will change the world of marketing and media. Please welcome to the stage David Rowan.
Thank you, nice to be here. So I'm going to talk a bit about the future and how you can foresee it. And the main thing you need to do is go to the movies. Remember this? A dozen years ago.
The road you're on, John Anderton, is the one.
Minority Report. John Anderton walking through the mall. Personally targeted ads. Biometric recognition.
John Anderton.
Kind of got it right.
Get away, John Anderton. Forget your troubles.
All those technologies are pretty much available, and at some stage, sooner or later, are going to become accessible to you mainstream. And I'm going to look at how the emerging technologies are likely to impact on this industry. You're the experts, but I spend quite a lot of time talking to entrepreneurs, to the venture capitalists, go to places like MIT Media Lab where they're trying to work out the future. So I'm just going to share with you some of the trends and startups and ideas that I'm seeing and try and see how it becomes relevant. And there are 10 different things which I see impacting on outdoor and how it links to the consumer. And very quickly, I'll go through them all and then one by one. But the next decade become more biometric, more location aware, more based upon sensors, more based on understanding consumers' emotional intentions, more based on data, linking to whatever new types of mobile device they're carrying, not just smartphones and tablets, more likely to lead to a transaction there and then, and more likely to do so in a frictionless way where you barely notice. It's going to become smarter, and finally, more granular, where you can interact with individuals based on knowledge of them. And just to start with, when I talk about biometric, I talk about some of the ideas coming out of startups like this one called Unical out of Finland.
Imagine you're late to your plane. There is a huge queue, but you instantly check in while running to the border control. Imagine you drive to the petrol station. You casually fuel your tank and your payment is done simultaneously. You just had to click OK.
Nice cheesy presentation. But the idea that face recognition in the outdoor environment will increasingly not just recognize your demographic, but recognize you individually and help transact, help check in, help pay for things. I think it's going to come mainstream. Already, there's an American company, Diebold, that's devising ATMs, and a couple of months ago it showed this prototype, which uses a tablet-type screen on the ATM to recognize your face. Is it secure? Well, they're going to work on it, but in combination with some other biometrics, who knows? Then there are devices like this. It's another startup, part of the wearable technology revolution that's happening. It's called the NIME, and it tracks your heartbeat. Everybody has a particular pattern, and it uses that as a way of interacting, of checking in. So we're heading to an era where you don't notice that there is a connection being made, a transaction happening. It becomes frictionless. And you're also getting, this is quite a fun project out of MIT Media Lab. This is the mirror that tells you how healthy you are. It's got a camera deeply embedded with face recognition algorithms that monitor, because your skin slightly changes color when you breathe in and when you breathe out, your heartbeat. And it tells you, displaying on the screen, this is your heart rate at the moment. And this is just the beginning of something quite big. So it's partly going to be sensors that we wear, maybe not a wristband, there may be other variations, and partly normal objects of furniture that will know more about us. So the second big thing that's happening is our devices are knowing more and more precisely where we are. So one of the interesting things inside this little product is something called Ibeacon, which is technology that uses the low-energy version of Bluetooth to know you are there, but not just from NFC very nearby, but from maybe 100 feet away. And so you can increasingly be spotted coming into a shop, coming onto a station platform, and it will know your individual device. And this is going to be a huge thing. Lots of big companies like Qualcomm are investing very heavily in it. There's already startups. There's one called, I think, Ibeacon something, Estimate, using Ibeacon, which allows retailers to put this little blue design somewhere in the shop, and it will send an offer directly to you if you're in their network. So as well as being able to send a message to you, there are startups now working on locating exactly where you are in a multi-story building, using other technologies. For instance, the electromagnetic pattern of the building interacting with your smartphone can tell the database you are on the second floor in front of the Starbucks. This is one of those companies. This is called Indoor Atlas, and it detects different patterns based on where you are. It allows the retailer to track particular movements. Again, granular targeting. So at the same time, the ability of sensors to understand much more about us and the falling price of these sensors is leading to a whole bunch of new opportunities. And it's going to affect how we interact with our house, how we connect our online calendars to our self-driving cars at some stage in the future. Some interesting things happening now. So Nest is a company started by Tony Fadell, who was one of the key people behind the iPod and the iPhone. And it's trying to make the thermostat sexy. It's using sensors embedded in a thermostat to personalize how you like the room, how your other half likes the room, how the kids like the room, and it learns. And it's designed to be the foot in the door for the dashboard at home to all these other connected devices. So it will talk to your smart device. It will adapt as your behavior adapts. And again, fewer buttons for you to press. So we're talking about the Internet of Things. It's been talked about for a while, but it's pretty much arriving now. So Wired did a big package of pieces recently about what it means for us. And when there are very cheap sensors everywhere that are talking in real time to the network, it means the swimming pool heats up when there's a barbecue on your calendar, or the dog tag will text you when the dog leaves the garden. In the street, in the road, the car will predict collision. There'll be an alert that comes to your phone, or the taxi will get an automatic direction based on your schedule. Or much more important, the smartphone will warn you of an ex-girlfriend or boyfriend ahead. So we just got to be creative how we use these technologies, but they're pretty much there. The fun use that came out of the Boston Mayor's office recently, they've been using the accelerometer in your smartphone, encouraging you, if you're in Boston, to download the street bump app, and then when you're driving along and it detects movement in certain places on the road, it will recognize that as, well, that's evidence of potholes, and it will send back a signal telling them where they need to start repairing the road. So it's just at the beginning. Last week I met a startup from Croatia called Teddy the Guardian that's using teddy bears like this, but with sensors packed into the sleeve, the wrist of the teddy bear. And they've got 5,000 pre-orders for a service, you'll pay to subscribe, where your kid, could be a baby, could be a toddler, will be playing with the teddy bear, and the sensors will work out how healthy they are, their body temperature, even their blood oxygen level, their stress level, and feedback to the anxious parents, either at work or at home, on their phones. And so that's before we get these tiny, tiny sensors going mainstream and talking about smart dust, and talking about micro motes. Again, a lot of these will get their energy from electromagnetic radiation. They won't need batteries, and they will send signals back to the network. So we're talking about trillions of sensors in the atmosphere. One of the fun things that's happening is some smart academics are working out how to let computers understand not just where you are or even who you are, but what you're feeling. And there's a branch of computing which is called affective, with an A, computing, that came out of places like the Media Lab, where at the moment, if you go past the room where they're studying this, there's a big display screen which in real time doesn't just project who's walking past, it projects based on face recognition if they're happy. If they're sad, it puts a little smiley face if you're happy. And what they're doing, they started out working on how to understand autism and how to help autistic people recognize the emotions of people engaging with them. But they realized this is actually quite useful for commercial applications. So there's a spin-off company called Affectiva, which works with advertising agencies and film studios, and it uses people at home just using the webcam of their laptop, watching, this is the Dove advert, and it feeds back, like frame by frame, how engaged they are, whether that's a genuine smile, whether they seem annoyed. Again, recognizing patterns in the face. This woman, just at home, standard webcam. Getting a bit more stressed as it goes on. The big drop in a moment is connected with the cosmetic surgery sequence. Okay, ready for it? Not so happy about that. So the people behind Affectiva are talking about this kind of killing, if it still exists, the focus group, because what people tell the marketers is not necessarily what they feel. And then we're getting mannequins, like this one from an Italian company called Almax, which is, because it's got little cameras in the eyes, monitoring who's walking past and who's looking at it. And it can tell, you know, this is a female, she's a young demographic, she's Caucasian. So kind of racially and demographically segmenting the customer and sending back feedback. Which ties into one of the big trends. As we get more and more data, we can analyze not just big patterns, but individuals and their behavior. This is another startup called QVidi.
VidiCube uses state-of-the-art video analytics software. It detects the faces of the persons looking towards the sensor and tracks their attention time and their dwell time. The demographics of all viewers are also assessed in real time with excellent accuracy. VidiCube fully respects the viewer's privacy, since no image or video are ever recorded and no uniquely identifiable data is ever kept. VidiCube can also be used as a vertical people counter, simply by placing the video sensor on the ceiling. You can define several virtual gates and count the ingoing and outgoing traffic for each one of them. All the metrics computed by VidiCube are delivered to you in private online dashboards, which you can consult anytime with your web browser.
So this is here now, but this is just the beginning. And we're also getting other startups like Viewsy that's working to give you a dashboard measuring foot traffic, where people are going. Data becomes zero cost to store, ever easier to collect. Now, obviously, mobile is a key part of this. But how do you engage with the mobile device, and what is the mobile device? So there was a nice study by a Helsinki analyst, Tomio Honen, that was quoted by Mary Meeker in her Internet Trends report, which suggested that on average now people with smartphones are engaging with them 150 times a day. So, you know, messaging and voice and calendar and photos. And that's 150 times they're not engaging with human beings or other media. And at the same time, the number of people starting to get these devices, not just in the West, is booming extraordinarily. 1 million new people get on the smartphone every day. It's 3 times the number of babies born, but there's still this nice gap. There's still maybe 1.5 billion on the smartphone, 5 billion plus on the mobile phone, not yet on the smartphone. And that's going to level out in the next 18 months, 2 years. So you have to be thinking, how will everywhere in the world, every advertiser, be engaging with people's phones? Because, you know, all the tablets, the devices are just going exponential in growth. So quarter by quarter after launch, this is, the orange one is the tablet. And look where the green desktop PC is, or even the blue notebooks. So the tablet, suddenly out of nowhere, is the biggest selling of these computing devices. And then the amount of traffic we are going to be generating on these devices. This is just mobile data by the GSMA, the body for the mobile industry. Again, it's one of those curves that you kind of need to be on. But I mentioned briefly the wearable revolution. This is happening now. So there's a lot of phones with sensors embedded being launched. Apple's doing one, Samsung's doing one. And then there's things like Google Glass. Don't know if this is the form factor that everybody's going to love. It hardly feels natural and fashionable. But tech journalists like Robert Scoble are saying, you know, he's never going to go back to other kinds of devices. This is the future. He's wearing them 24 hours a day. In fact, if you don't want to see a man in the shower, look away now. There's Robert Scoble wearing his Google Glass. But, you know, Google's not the only company. So the Japanese company called Telepathy doing one. In China, Baidu's doing one. And this is interesting. Google recently put in a patent application for a way that you can track the gaze of people wearing Google Glass. So maybe you can see what ads they're looking at and whether they like them or not. Who knows? And then there are other devices we're carrying. This is the Momoto. You wear it around your neck. It takes a photo automatically every 30 seconds, sends it to the database. So you have an automatic log of everything you've seen, and it will be searchable. Ubiquitous cameras. The ability to make transactions without necessarily getting out your credit card. So we know about the cryptocurrencies, the bitcoins, and there's a whole bunch of others out there. And I think you have to assume that it's going to be easier with fewer steps to get somebody to spend money. They'll notice, but it will be barely noticing. And you have to start thinking, well, how can the brand engage in a way that exchanges money? So one of the reasons they will be successful is if they can get rid of the friction. And already there's startups like Stripe and like Klarna that are taking as many steps as possible out of the completion of the transaction. So as soon as you have that sudden intent to pay, they will get you without you necessarily having to type in your full address, because maybe you've got your address in another database that's linked. So the penultimate of these big trends is artificial intelligence and how that is going to come to outdoor. So you know about IBM's Watson winning Jeopardy against the humans. Well, again, there's a whole load of stuff happening here. Just for instance, real-time language translation into really difficult languages. This is a demonstration Rich Rashid of Microsoft gave a couple of months ago, real-time translation into Chinese, but also with the inflection of his own voice.
I'm speaking in English, And hopefully you'll hear me speak in Chinese in my own voice.
That delay is going to go in a year or two.
Again, the results are not perfect. There are, in fact, quite a few errors.
结果并不完美。
It's kind of Douglas Adams' Babelfish from The Hitchhiker's Guide to the Galaxy. So the 10th of those big trends is you'll be able to target people on an individual level, wherever they are, whoever they're connected with, and on whatever device. The buzzword John Durr, big venture capitalist, talks about SOLO-MO, social, local, and mobile. But I think you have to think of the opportunities offered by connecting all three. So these are not the whole future, but the kind of William Gibson line, these are a bit of the future. And you can see why a lot of these may go mainstream. So there's a but, which was mentioned earlier on in one of the clips. You have to get consumer acceptance, because some of the things that seem convenient maybe will be seen as spooky. Is anybody here from Renew? So Renew had a bit of interesting press a couple of months ago. They've got these litter bins in the city. They've been testing them. And it transpired that they could work out the demographic of people walking past by getting the MAC number, the individual identifier of their phone, to tell if these were iPhone people or Windows Phone people. And the City of London said, hang on, you can't have that. So we're in an era where increasingly there's going to be sensitivities about not just what the devices are telling us about you, but about how vulnerable we are in terms of security by giving up this information. So security is going to be another thing. Some fun things happening in the toilet world you may not be studying. If you want to spend about £3,500, you can get a toilet called the Sartis, which is all electronic and connects to your smartphone. There's an Android app, and you can set it to flush when you want and to deodorize. A security report came out 2 months ago warning that these were hackable. And if you had an enemy, they could easily access your toilet to keep it flushing all night. And this kind of privacy thing, you know, when it affects us, it does affect us. So this is the Russian version of Street View from Yandex Maps, and this is a genuine image. A woman called Marina, who was going out with that man, was looking up a place in a small town, and she noticed that that man was with another woman, and they're no longer together. So I'm going to leave you finally with, I went to Singularity University in California, where they're trying to train the next generation to think about, you know, the problems and how we can solve them on a big scale. And the one message that I got out of there, above all, was how the accelerated pace of technological innovation is exponential when we're not used to thinking beyond linear. And when I say that, in a linear world, 1 + 1 + 1 to the stage of 30, you get to 30. In an exponential world where you're doubling each year, you get to 1 billion. And that's why Moore's law was still rising, you know, doubling processing power every 18 months. And the same trends are happening to the falling cost of solar energy. It's happening to the falling cost of decoding the human genome. In fact, the green line is the falling cost of sequencing DNA, which is falling faster than the straight line, which is Moore's law. And, you know, this trend is hitting how quickly we're adopting consumer devices. So tablets took just 2 years to get to 50 million compared with smartphones at 7 years. It means new technologies like 3D printing are coming mainstream from nowhere, creating new opportunities. And then fun things like this, which was just released last week. It's a conference called SIGGRAPH. Someone's put in a paper, some Israelis, how to take a photo, a 2D photo, use their software, and turn it into a 3D image that you can rotate and then print out.
This example shows modeling a tap. After modeling, we map the texture from the image and edit the parametric model to achieve image editing. Before manipulating the object, the background is completed using the patch match algorithm. We change its rotary switch to cruciform and rotate it. Then we duplicate the tap and rotate it and attach it to a different side of the wall.
And then
This
you can print it
example
out,
shows modeling a telescope.
2D into 3D.
While modeling each
So
part,
finally,
geosemantic relation
films. where we started. It's 1968. There's this movie, 2001: A Space Odyssey. Look at what these guys are looking at as they're having their lunch. If you'd been smart in 1968, you'd have invested in an uninvented company called Apple that someday was going to invent the iPad.
So I am constantly occupied.
Thank you very much.